going to go ahead and get rolling. My name is Duran Washington, and I am with Epic Education. I am an equity trainer with them. I've been with them for about a year and a half, but for the type of work that we do, friends, it feels like I've been with the company for about 11 years. If that gives you any context to the work that I do, and I'll allow my wonderful co-facilitator introduce himself. You're muted, Cliff.
Hello. I think that's every educator's problem right now. We start talking and we don't unmute ourselves. I'm Cliff Thompson. I'm working with CES as an equity trainer, and I'm loving this space. And these webinars have been awesome. And so tonight, hopefully, you will enjoy Duran and I.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, friends, I'm going to ask for a very, very tall task, and it's going to be a risk. I'm hoping that this doesn't totally cause you to say, you know what, I don't even want to be in this space. But there's an activity that I would like for us to do, but it requires us to turn on our cameras. So I'm going to ask that you turn on your camera, because the activity that we're going to do, it's going to be this little weird, thank you so much, I appreciate it. We're going to do this weird thing where it's going to be on and off, on and off. And for us to feel the height of it, we have to start with the camera on. And so if you have something that you want to maybe even put over the camera, I think the main thing here is just to get an idea of when you're turning the camera off or when you're turning the camera on. So I thank you for that. I appreciate you. I know you're like, listen, I don't like her already. She's having me turn on my camera. Friends, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. So we're going to do this activity, and I'm excited to see what you think about it, because we are a small group. My hope is that we can have some rich dialogue. We were going to do breakout rooms. Hi, how you doing? We see you on the road. Thank you for still joining us, being a player. I appreciate that. But I'm excited to hear what you think. So we'll have some deeper dialogue about this process. So cameras on for the most part, and here we go. I am going to read some prompts, okay? So everyone now can turn the cameras off, but in a moment, you might have the opportunity to turn them on. So everyone's camera should be off at this point, okay? And Cliff, there you go. Cliff, if you want to as well. So I'm going to read some prompts. The prompts will also stay on the PowerPoint. They will be on the deck for you. If this prompt relates to you in any way, if it's your story in any way, you're just going to turn on the camera. And then we're going to keep it on for 30 seconds, not too long, and then I'll read another prompt. And if that prompt still resonates with you and your story, you'll keep your camera on. But if it does not, you'll turn the camera off. So this reminds me of that activity, kind of like that inner out of circle thing, where you step in the circle if this is you, and you come out of the circle if it's not you. It's very similar to that, but this is going to be our way to anchor ourselves in the upcoming discussions and prompts that we have. So again, cameras are off. We're going to turn the camera on if what I share or the prompt or the statement resonates with you. Some of them are going to sound very ambiguous. That's the nature of them. And then you're going to turn the camera back off if it's not you. So you'll kind of do that thing. And I want you to be very mindful of what you're saying, how it feels, how it's resonating with you, because we're going to process. All right, friends, here we go. So cameras are off. The first one is, you're going to turn on your camera if your parents did not graduate from college. Okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, wonderful. Here's the next one. And if this next one resonates with you, you'll keep your camera on. Turn your camera on if you were born outside of the United States. Okay. Number 3, turn camera on if you have ever been in an AP or honors course. Wonderful. If you have ever felt left out, turn your camera on. Camera on if you've ever felt left out. Turn your camera on if you felt uncomfortable about your body. Thank you, thank you. Couple more here. Camera on if you were treated negatively because of your race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, religion, identity, ability, or sexual orientation. Turning your camera on if you felt that before. Thank you, friends. Camera on if you have ever felt like people have talked about you negatively related to your race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, religion, identity, ability, or orientation. And then the final one. If you have ever misjudged someone, turn your camera on. Wonderful. Friends, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for playing. It's an interesting activity. We're always finding ways to make the virtual space as similar to what it's like being face to face as possible. Sometimes we miss the mark, okay? Maybe this was one of those times. But I thank you for engaging in this, and I want to hear from you now. What came up for you during this activity? And friends, if you want to go ahead and go back to black on your camera, you certainly can. You can have that space. I know you're driving. We want you alive and well, so you don't have to stay in this space if you don't need to. But I want to hear from you still, nevertheless. What came up for you during this activity, or what resonated with you? I will start by sharing the first time that I did this activity. What resonated with me is that I noticed that the people who had the cameras on, or when we were doing it in face-to-face setting, the people who were stepping in the circle absolutely surprised me. I wasn't expecting to see certain people, and so I had to be very mindful of my own biases. So that's what I felt the first time I did this. So I extend it to you. Who would like to share?
Just
As you were
unmute
reading,
yourselves.
oh, as you were reading the prompts, it felt as though some of them were listing, personal struggles that people had to overcome. And then you came to the one about the AP and honors courses. And granted, going through those courses would be a struggle, but I felt I looked at those as that being a privilege to be in the AP or honors courses, at least during my time when I was in school at that time. It wasn't. So that question just kind of threw me for a little loop. Anyhow, that was just my thought with that one.
No, you got it. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Thank you. Other thoughts and ideas that came up?
I noticed that we had a lot of commonalities. I think in each one of the pieces, there were a lot of things that I had in common with other people who are here.
Mm-hmm. For sure. For sure. Any other thoughts, Cliff, as well? Did you have anything that came up for you as well?
Well, as one of the facilitators of this, I've realized that asking people to turn on their cameras is opening up to vulnerability. So if you see I have a bean bag over my shoulder this side and I don't know what's there, because usually I use a virtual background. And so I know what's going to happen next. So if you're going to be thoughtful in what you're doing, then I had to be thoughtful about opening my screen and sharing where I am with everyone else. And then going through it, they don't know this, but some of those were added after we ran through. So it was have you ever done, what was the last one? Have you ever
Misjudged?
misjudged someone? And I have, and I know each time I've done it, notice each time I've done it, I felt bad for doing it because I wouldn't want it done to me. And to share both, all of the times that I tend to do it, it tends to involve a bald head white man with a goatee. And I just automatically assume skinhead. And I become real cautious and protective of myself. And each time the person has turned out to be like a really good guy, like someone that you want to hang out with. And I just felt so bad that I allowed myself to do something that I wouldn't want done.
Very powerful. Thank you. Thank you for being so transparent early on, because that is absolutely the direction I'm hoping that we're going into, right? let's have some real conversation, especially with everything that's going on with the election, post-election, all of that stuff. I want to hear from you. I think we deserve the space to be honest and talk about some of these things that we don't get a lot of opportunity to talk about. So Zaida, I see you. I haven't seen you in a long time. I missed you. Oh my goodness. I feel like there's a celebrity in this space. It's been a while. Do you have anything that you want to bless us with? Any wisdom, any idea or thoughts that came up for you as we went through this process?
No, I just, as I just commented, I apologize. I was not prepared to be open camera. But when the question came up about parents, I found it awkward because my parents are not a single unit. There were two of them, and one had a college education and one did not. And so, do I answer it as if they were not or as if they were?
Right.
So that was all. Nice to see you both.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's really interesting with the questions there, I like how there is ambiguity because it makes you think about the categories, right? Is it all or nothing? And in life, when it comes to us being categorized, it feels like it's all of nothing. When you go into certain places, you got to be all of one thing and maybe not a whole lot of another thing. And that's the direction that we're going to be going in. Friends, Mickey was going to be joining us today, but I want to acknowledge her. She's with us in spirit, but she's not obviously going to be able to be with us today. So I wanted to let you know that I wish she was here because, oh my goodness, that activity was her idea originally. And I would love to have seen how it would have rolled out, but we're going to have to go on without her today. And then also we have this scheduled until I believe 5, but we're more than likely not going to make it past an hour. However, that time is still available. If we do have rich dialogue and you want to stay around, we would want to just kind of talk it out. We have that space at least to do that. Okay. Any other thoughts about this or things that you want to share or remind us of as it relates to that activity before I move forward? All right. Wonderful, wonderful. So I have this quote here. I know if you're familiar with Epic's trainings at all, we always start with some type of quote. It's a great way for us to get anchored. And also, I always ask someone in the space to read out for us what the quote says, because we like to have different energy in the room by proxy of voice. So is there anyone in this space who would love to read for us this lofty quote that I have here from Brent Staples?
I'd been a fool. I'd been walking the streets, grinning good evening at people who were frightened to death of me. I did violence to them by just being. Out of nervousness, I began to whistle. On the street at night, I whistled popular tunes from the Beatles and Vivaldi's Four Seasons.
Wonderful, thank you. You should narrate audiobooks. You sound very, very natural what you're doing. Wonderful. And if you're just now joining us, I'm still admitting people. If you're just now joining us, we're right in the beginning. We did an activity where we talked about our intersectionalities and categories. But right now, we're basically doing kind of our opening. We're anchoring by looking at this this quote from Brent Staples. So if you're just now coming in, you're right on time. It's good. So Brent Staples, I'm not sure if you are familiar with the book Whistling Vivaldi, but it's a wonderful book. It's a lot of theory in it. It's going to be one of those reads that you're not going to just be able to get done in one setting, right? Because you're going to be processing a lot, not in one sitting for sure. But in this particular quote, it's talking about how, I believe in Chicago, Brent Staples, walking on the street in the evening or whenever, prior to a revelation, was not recognizing himself and how he was being perceived in his identity as male and as being Black male. And then as you can see in the quote, there was this awakening or this revelation to which he realized that his presence, being who he is as a Black male, was potentially threatening to people. I would imagine noticing people moving to one side of the street when he would walk past, or other things that let him know that there's something about my very presence that is alarming to folks. And so what he would do, as you see at the bottom of the quote, is recite different songs or sing songs or hum songs to kind of soften his identity, if you will. And so I want to ask you, what do you think about that? What's coming up for you? Is there a feeling or a thought that comes up for you by reading Brent Staples' thoughts, or a similar experience that you've had related to this? Is there anything about the quote that's resonating with you? Does it remind you of something else that you've seen or experienced or have witnessed?
Well, I've been reading Native Son by Richard Wright. My son's reading it for his AP Lit class right now. And it's a first read for me, although I taught English for 27 years and I try to read pretty widely, but I hadn't read that book. And I'm just struck that I did violence to them just by being. You know, there's so many times in the novel where bigger comments about how, you know, he's killed before, just, you know, in his interactions with people, and the way that he, just by being there and being Black in that situation, he had done violence to them. And it wasn't anything he actually did, but just by being in the space. And so I find this, you know, connects right into what Richard Wright is saying in the novel. So
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. Any other ideas or thoughts that comes up for you just looking at this quote, of maybe a word or a phrase that is in it that is resonating with you? Or another way to think about this too is, has there ever been a time where you are in a professional space, somewhere in your community or with family, where you felt like you had to elevate certain parts of who you are to have a sense of belonging, right? Where there's parts of you you felt like you needed to talk about or illustrate or highlight so that you can feel connection or people can receive you in that part of you, right? Because what's happening here with Brent Staples is that in the way that he's appearing, we know in our society there are stereotypes tied to that. And so for him to show that he's a non-threat, it's to show that he's familiar with the pop songs of the time or the Four Seasons, for example. So does anybody want to share anything that comes up for them when they think of it that way?
So in the workspace, there was a time that I was an athletic director. And that was my goal in education because as a student athlete, the people I interacted with the most were coaches and not principals or vice principals, partly because I was scared of my mother. So when I went to school, I did what I was told. um, so I wanted to be an athletic director because I felt like that position could influence the academic lives of students in a way that I was influenced. But when I would then be called into meetings, that was really they would call all administrators into meetings, and I would try to like get out of it, like, 'cause I don't want to sit there, but they'd be like, no, you have to come. And then when I got in the meeting and I gave an answer or I gave a suggestion, it was like, yeah, he's just the athletic director. What's he know? You know, and it was like, hello, I am an educator. I was a teacher. Why aren't you listening to me? And so I had to start doing things and having conversations outside of the meeting with people so that they would know that I did have some ideas and some answers that were based in pedagogy and experience and research
Mm.
and understanding that you have to do other things to make, I don't know if it was to make them feel comfortable, but at least to make myself feel comfortable in the meetings that I didn't want to be in the first place.
Sure. Absolutely. Molly, I saw your camera come on. I don't know if you had something that you want to share as well. Any insight from you, Queen?
Yeah, when you were bringing that up about just blending in, and I think about just really this last year and with the election and, um, just my own personal views, I feel like sometimes when I was in mixed company with people who were much more conservative, feeling like either I had to kind of assimilate to the conversation and not really, be what, like the token liberal teacher in the group, et cetera. And so I felt a lot of that pressure just in different conversations, just politically, because I felt as though this last year, people were letting politics divide everything, whereas, you can have people from all different types of belief systems And so but I felt that pressure many times in different settings that I thought was very awkward. And, depending on your mood, depends on what you're going to say and how far you're going to go, or are you just going to be silent and just go with the flow and not cause a ruckus, So that was just something this year and I guess probably mixed a little bit with colleagues at work too, but just out and everywhere. That was something this year that happened often.
I agree. I've definitely felt some different things where I would hear an idea or perspective that was really strong. And I'm like, okay, let me be mindful of how I'm showing up in this space because I don't want to disrupt this space that I'm in right now. Thank you for sharing that. I would love to hear from more of you. But before I go forward, I want us to be in this place where we are being mindful that you can share. Like this table talk is for you. Allow yourself to be free in that, right? And this is a confidential space as well. So thank you for that. Also, the things that you're feeling, if you don't want to share it straight out, you can absolutely put it in the chat as well. That's another way that we can communicate with each other in this journey, okay? All right. So I have this grid here of different intersectionalities. Definitely a non-exhaustive list. Like there are many more that can go here. It reminds me of the cover page of the book, Whistling Vivaldi, but I wanted to kind of give us a frame to kind of play with here. Okay. So if you're able, just to yourself, introspectively, see if you can start identifying or mapping yourself in these circles. I know the colors are all over the place. That might be a little bit more challenging. Just, it's loud, right? But are you able to map parts of who you are by looking at this grid? And as you're mapping yourself, right? White, male, gay, Indian, young, Black, female, Latino, Asian, right? As you're mapping yourself, if you just go to one of those categories, one of those aspects of who you are, there is a line and a circle of stereotypes and myths around that one category, just around that one. So before you get to show up in that and how you express that, how it looks on you, there are ideas and stereotypes that precede you, right? And then you layer on the other parts of who we are because we're multidimensional. We have many pieces of who we are. Then there's another, maybe it's associated with like your age or where you come from, socioeconomic status, your religion. And then there are also ideas, thoughts, and stereotypes. And also something I want us to be mindful of too, is that the myths and the stereotypes are not always recognized as being negative. For example, the common stereotype that we hear for Asian Americans is that they're outstandingly just amazing at math, right? And science and STEM. So when you're looking at that on paper, it looks amazing. Like, I mean, that's a great stereotype. But the reason why it's harmful, the reason why it is a stereotype is because that cannot be said for an entire group. It cannot be said. But if this is the assumption, how successful will they be interviewing to be a lit teacher or a judge or something else outside of that STEM? So I want us to be mindful of these categories that we occupy and how oftentimes we have to move more into one category for a setting, kind of like what Molly was sharing. We have to move more into one intersection of who we are based off of where we are. And then maybe in another setting, we have to move out of it to survive there, to feel a sense of belonging there. And so what I'm now going to do is invite you to do kind of like a opening activity. And Cliff, what do you think? Do you think that we should still put people into breakout rooms of like maybe 2, or do you think we should just kind of do this in this larger space? What do you
I
think?
think we can drop some of the answers in the chat and do it into larger space.
Right.
It does feel
Sure.
it feels like we're in a group together.
Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. So usually how I would do this part is I would have us go into breakout rooms of maybe 2 to 3 people, and you have that space to talk, right? Because some of these conversations go really, really deep. You have that space to talk. But again, like Cliff is saying, we'll do it here. I like that idea. So let's take an opportunity to just share these things. Your name, what brought you to this space today? Which identity or identities do you draw on to be successful in your work? So again, if we're thinking about that grid, what parts of who you are do you have to draw on to be successful there? Okay. Which identity or identities are dominant when being parent, friend, or family member? Are you exchanging parts of who you are to be successful in those other roles? So who would like to start? And you don't have to share all of these. Maybe you can just share ideas about one or two of the prompts just to get the conversation rolling, and we'll keep it moving from there.
I can model. My name is Cliff, and what brought me to this table talk is working with EQI. And I knew Duran had a table talk scheduled for today, and she was by herself. And I said, you know what? I'd love to work with Duran in doing this. And the identity that I draw on most to be successful at work when I'm with students is the fact that I still feel like I'm 8 to 10 years old. Um, and so that youthfulness, even though I've been told by a friend that I am now at 48 closer to middle age or middle aged than that 8 to 10 year old, but I draw on that. And I'm gonna I'm gonna be unsafe in that I was doing an observation and it was Dr. Seuss, and Dr. Seuss week, high school AP class, and they were reading a Dr. Seuss book, and it was like, I have three balls and red balls and orange balls and blue balls and these balls and that balls. And I had to walk out the room because, again, I'm 10 years old. And so that youthfulness, I think, comes out sometimes, and willingness to share with themselves. So that's my identity that comes out, my youthful identity. And the identities that are dominant when I'm being a parent is uh, being a positive man, being a positive Black man. I think that is the identity I draw on as a parent and a friend and a family member, so that my kids and younger people in my family can see that you can be that and be strong at the same time.
Mm. Thank you, Cliff. Thank you. Who would like to share next?
I can go. I'm Michelle, and I came today. I'm working on a equity group on my campus, and I'm a seed leader. So I'm starting a seed seeking educational equity and diversity group at my school. And the committee that I'm on in our equity team is focused on professional development and, how can we give teachers training to be more successful in having difficult conversations in their classroom? How can they help their students feel successful and supported? And how can we work towards racial justice as a school site? So, I'm looking for opportunities and resources that I can continue doing my own work in that capacity. And this seemed to fit in very well with that. Certainly, the fact that I'm a white woman, I draw very heavily on in my day-to-day work as a teacher and as an educator, and how can I use my voice to make space for people who traditionally don't have, power and privilege in the same spaces that I do. And those are still very prevalent in my work, outside of school, at home, with friends and with family. I'm an educator, and I'm constantly in that vein, and trying to educate people and trying to understand where they're coming from and be empathetic, but also help them to understand where other people are coming from. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Thank you. Who else would like to share? Who would like to go next?
I can go next.
Thank you.
I don't know if we're all in the same region, but good afternoon. My name is Michael Essien. Currently, I'm a principal here in the Bay Area at a middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. What brought me to this table talk is the title, Similarities in Our Differences. I think for me as a leader, when you have multiple identities, people with multiple backgrounds, et cetera, I think it's our similarities that need to be emphasized to engage in a conversation to build a bridge to someplace different. And so I want to lean in and be part of a conversation that is dealing with the similarities. so that we can actually get to some better place.
Mm.
Which identity or identities do I draw upon in my work to be successful? I think there are two. Uh, when I was a student, drawing on that background as because I was not the traditional student, I was not the good student, and now here I am. I'm the principal of the school with discipline issues. And then the other piece as a teacher. Um, Teachers aren't listened to. They weren't listened to when I was coming through, and so now I'm the principal, and I get to choose to listen to teachers or not listen to teachers. I get to choose to set the policies for kids that are considered inappropriate or bad. And so I draw on those identities when thinking about policies, when thinking about showing up in professional development and setting what we do or do not do as a faculty. Which identities do I draw upon as being a parent? I come from a time I was raised up in LA. I went to LA Unified Schools with a single parent in a time of crack cocaine and gangs exploding. And so as a parent, I draw on my identity as a kid, what I didn't have my father around, and what my mom had to go through as a single parent, and trying to think about what I can provide uh, as a partner to a woman. That I don't want my wife to be a single parent to deal with the kids, etc. So I try to draw on that identity as a kid and those experiences to make different choices.
Very well said. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you're just now joining us, this is our opening kind of activity where we're just thinking about intersectionality, parts of who we are as it relates to socioeconomic status, religion, race, you as a learner, your ability, all of those different things, to talk about when do we pull in or draw in a certain part of who we are to have a sense of belonging, to be successful. And then maybe where do we, let that exchange that identity or intersectionality or piece of who we are go for something else so that we can show up and arrive in another space. So thank you if you're just joining us. Who else would like to share?
I'm willing to share. I appreciate your question. The reason I decided to make space to drop in today is because especially this recent election has raised for me um, the the sort of banner question of how do I what's the counter dialogue to the monolith that the media has created about my Latino population? I mean, we're not a monolith, and the media is finally sort of, the message is starting to get out, but that's been an area of my focus and concern, and especially, particularly, I guess. I am myself Latina. I think my Twitter handle is Media Latina because I'm also, my father is US born and raised, and was, God rest his soul, Irish American. And on my mother's side, she and I were born in Puerto Rico. She was born and raised there. All of my relatives are still there. And we are in the Caribbean. We come in all shades and colors, even within the same family. So we have lots of issues around that. How do I show up in my work? Currently, I'm a full professor at Holy Names University. I teach a course in Latino culture, and I'm a former administrator in a school district. Both as a director of special ed and as a principal and as a director and founder of an adolescent immigrant center. So the fun thing really about that question is I realize that I get to show up in different contexts, in different personas that are part of me. For the course I teach for the special ed teachers, I get to show up and emphasize the part of me that's a former director of special ed and teacher, and et cetera, for other parts of me. And the Latino culture class in particular, I have lots of young people, graduate students, who come forward confused about whether they are or are not Latino. Do they get to claim Latino or of course the more scholarly Latinx that everybody wants to understand now, which terminology to use. But anyway, so that's sort of the driving question, I guess. And I would be remiss not to also add that there's been a proposal at my university to create something called an anti-racist certificate. And I've been invited to serve on that committee, and which has met once. And at the first committee, I voiced my concern that I don't think there's such a thing as arriving at anti-racism, that this is a lifelong learning. And the idea that we should issue a certificate that anybody could go and wave in the face of whomever or as proof of something is somewhat horrifying to me. So those are the things I'm in the process of navigating, and I'm always eager to hear what other perspectives people bring to it. So thank you for letting me participate.
Thank you.
I just started working with the Boy Scouts of America as I was bamboozled, by the way, into doing it. But giving back to the youth, I was working with Boy Scouts of America, and all I could think of when you said the anti-racist certificate was like the Cub Scout badge, like you get to walk around with some badge that then doesn't say you have to act in any particular way. You're right, like you could act in ways that totally go against the badge, but once someone calls you on it, you now get to say, look at my badge. I have one. And that, so maybe I was laughing a little too hard, but
no, actually
thought of right away.
Clifton, it so came to mind for me in the process. I thought, no, this would be like the Girl Scout or the Boy Scout banner, where you could collect various badges that have to do with the various aspects of anti-racism and implicit bias and and we could create a lot of badges about it. But to go with the idea that there is a certification that sort of means you've arrived is so horrifying. So I'll let you know what happens.
Thank you. Anyone else want to share? Maybe one or two more folks, and then we'll keep it moving. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was really, really rich. I feel like what you're experiencing is coming up in a lot of different places, these certificates and these kind of like one-off ways to invite people to be a part of an inclusive reality, but it's like a badge or a certificate. So thank you for sharing that. But anyone else want to share their ideas or thoughts as it relates to the prompts?
I'll share. My name's Molly Silva, and I'm also in California. You can see it's still light where I am. So hey there, Michael. I started teaching in the Bay Area. Now I'm in the Sacramento area. I am a Nancy fan. I saw Nancy at a conference a couple years ago. And then I got turned on to the organization, and I've attended various trainings. I do professional development and teacher evaluations in my district. We have a different format. So I'm always trying to just learn and understand more myself. Trying to think about the identities. I mean, those were two really hard questions thinking about. And originally I just thought, really, in my work, I try to be the support person for teachers. I know my first year teaching, I was in a school with a great team and a great support, and all my other friends in credential program, like their situations in schools that they were at were an absolute disaster. So I've always felt that, I was lucky enough to have a great opportunity, and just knowing that support and having colleagues available really shaped my ability to learn how to teach, learn how to be a teacher, and understand students and content, all those different pieces. So it's more of that nurturing piece, but I'm trying to also push myself out of just that nurturing piece as I'm coaching, because now I'm in an evaluator situation. So it has to be, it can't all be nurturing, When I think about it as a parent, I also was raised by a single mom. So, I identify being strong, female, educate yourself, be able to provide and take care of yourself. And with my daughters at home, originally I thought, okay, at work I'm nurturing, and at home I'm the strong female pushing my kids. And thought, I really need to look at that a little bit more. Granted, I do think their nurturing is here, and we're lucky that I have a fantastic husband who's a partner with raising our daughters. But it just, having these questions and this opportunity makes you take the time to reflect on your own perspective. And we definitely have different priorities. But thinking about, okay, am I always pushing too hard with my own children, or am I giving them the nurturing aspect that I'm essentially giving to strangers that I meet in my professional life as well? So just thank you for the questions and the opportunity to reflect on our own situations.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. And I definitely understand why you became a Nancy fan. I am too. Amazing, amazing with the things that she's doing and what she has done. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to, if there's no one else who wants to share, I'm going to go ahead and start turning it over to Cliff to kind of get us through the rest of what we want to share with you. Any other takers want to give us your mind, your heart, your ideas? All right. All right. Cliff, what you got for us?
So you have to control. So in your next slide, you see that those identities that were given to us, that we accept, that we decide on our own, sometimes they begin to merge and they change throughout life. So at one point, I was a young Black male administrator. And then after 25 years and 15 years as an administrator, I guess I'm not that young Black male administrator anymore. However, what has happened is I've taken on a different role. So, as that 31-year-old vice principal in a room with veteran administrators, you give an idea, and many times that idea is pushed to the side. It's not seen as something that's valuable. But then a couple minutes later, someone else says the same exact thing, and they're told, wow, great, yes, we should go with that. And that used to bother me because I had to wonder in the room I was in that was very diverse, was the idea coming out of my mouth not taken because I was male, because I was young, because I was Black, because I had been an athletic director? Like, which one of my circles, which one of these identities or combination of caused the room, if you will, to not accept my idea? Was it that I had only a master's degree and not an EDD or a PhD, even though most of the room didn't have either of those? But what is it that I'm coming across as that's causing people to not listen? And so I've realized now in the work, and what I have to do is not forget that feeling. I have to be the person in the room that doesn't get that feeling. So what I want you to do right now in the chat, would you drop a word or a phrase about how you feel when the identity that you come into a room with puts you at a disadvantage? How does it feel when that identity puts you at a disadvantage? Scared, small, hurt, frustrated, invisible, inferior, inquisitive. And so I don't know how you all were inside my body and my head when I felt like that, but those words, they're exactly it. And I came into teaching because I grew up, and I say this, I grew up in Inglewood, New Jersey. But in 1985, I moved to California into the San Fernando Valley. And I moved to an area because my mother's job relocated us. And I moved to an area where I was one of very few Blacks. No, I take that back. Yes, I was one of very few Black students in upper level 7th and 8th grade classes. And then when it came time to graduate or move on from the 8th grade, at the graduation, my mother said to me, she said, Jerry, when I drop you off in the morning, I see tons of Black boys and girls on the field playing. But at the ceremony, there weren't many. And I could have told her there weren't going to be many because I knew how we felt treated at the school, and I felt invisible, and I felt inferior, and I felt frustrated. And so now as an adult, when I went into that setting again, And now it's like, well, what is causing it? And so we feel like this. What identity now do you feel when you feel your most powerful? What identity do you think you're sitting in any space you're in? Could you drop that in the chat? What identity do you sit in when you feel most powerful? So I dropped in the chat, I've sit in the identity as an educator when I feel most powerful.
Mm.
When I don't have to pick educator, student. And I feel most powerful in that because of the word that came up, Gail, support. I get to support people and I get to help other people not feel this way. We have the power to use our identities in those circles to make people that also fit in some of those circles feel better when we're educators, when we're being creative, when we're being innovators. We have the power to pull those people and make them visible and let them know they've always been visible and let them know that they don't have to ever feel inferior no matter what the room or the space does to them. But these identities really become powerful in what it does to us.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm. Mhm.
let's be mindful of what that is and make sure that we do certain things. And so I was giving, as we were running through the thing, I'm also mindful in non-academic areas what my circles mean. And so I was telling Duran, I said, I'm really cognizant being raised by a single mother, um, and growing and recognizing that I would get worried about her when she was out late and watching too much television probably, and recognizing that there's spaces that women are less safe in than others, and realizing also then that sometimes I'm the guy walking behind you down that dark street. I'm the guy that gets into the elevator or into the stairwell with you and there's no one else around.
Mhm.
And so not wanting women to feel uncomfortable, do I just whistle? Do I sing the song? Or do I take active steps in helping? Like if we're walking in the parking garage, does it really hurt me to slow down a bit so that we can create distance if I'm behind you? Does it hurt for me to even just stop and act like I'm checking my phone and I don't want to walk into something just to create that distance so that you know I'm not following? That doesn't hurt.
Mhm.
But there's always spaces that we all come into and we can help. And like I said earlier, in the academic spaces, if someone were to give, there's this idea of mansplaining. So a man has to explain what a woman says, right? Well, if I run into those situations where a woman is giving a good idea or someone young is giving a good idea, and it doesn't seem like the room is accepting it just because of one of those circles, what I like to do is I would say, Duran, what you said really resonated with me. Could you explain it more? So I'm not going to explain it for Duran, but I'm
Mhm.
going to use what little bit of a circle that I might have that means something in that room to make someone that has other circles that's being overlooked known. Not going to mansplain it, not going to veteran explain it, not going to do any of that, but giving them some of my power or making sure that I'm aware of what's going on. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm. Mhm.
if and make sure that we do things to help others, because one of the commonalities that we have is we can show up and you know when it's challenged, we can show up and we can feel inferior and feel hurt. And we know that regardless of what our identity was in the moment, whether it was male, female, young, old, white, black, Latino, we all know what it means to feel inferior. We all know what it means somehow to feel unsupported. And so, what we have to do is be able to help others through that moment. And so as I was going through the two slides at once, sorry, Duran, I kind of hit on
Do you
some
need
of
me to go back? Do you want me to go back?
no. So we talked about our identity that we feel most powerful. We talked about what it feels like. What identity do you have that causes, so election time, and so we've talked about conservative and liberal, and or Democrat and Republican, and in different circles, depending on your view, you can feel a certain way. And like I said, I grew up in Inglewood, but then I moved to California, and then I went to a parochial high school in the San Fernando Valley. And after going to Hale Junior High in the San Fernando Valley, uh, I went to a parochial high school, and I was the only person that identified as Black in my graduating class. The reason why I say it that way is there was at least one student in every class that identified as Black. And then I say identified as is because I had some arguments with some students identified as Creole or other things that I would have considered Black that they didn't. So that was, my younger self. And I wouldn't argue now what anyone identifies as, but I was the only one. And so now as an adult, sometimes in sharing political views or in sharing thoughts about the way things are going on, again, I'm either seen as the angry Black man and what happened to me because I wasn't that way. And I have to explain, well, even if I am the angry Black man, when you really knew me, I was just a child. I was 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. Life has happened to me. But if one of my friends that happens to be white and male says the same thing in support of me, it seems that the comments change. And so I do understand what that feels like. And I also understand how we have to help each other and how we have to support each other. And I think that as far as, my part of this was to bring out using our power to help others not, as I scroll back, not feel inferior, not feel frustrated. But I would like to ask,
Well, Cliff,
Michael, what is
you go
the
ahead.
inquisitive? Sorry.
No, that's fine.
The inquisitive. Could you explain that for me a little bit? Because I liked that, but I don't want to mess it up.
So whenever I see a space where I'm devalued, or it makes me think about what are the structures in place? What is the culture in place? What questions might I need to ask to surface some things? So when I see those things, I want to know what's at play that's preventing not just me, because if I'm being devalued, then that space also devalues other things. So there's a cultural problem that exists. That's why I get inquisitive.
Very well.
Because then as a principal, then it becomes my job to uncover those things. And then how do I place things in the structure to undo what the culture is producing on a regular basis?
I think that's powerful, not just because, I think it's powerful because it's not about self. What you just said was about finding out what causes people to feel small in that space and then using that to stop it. And that's about other people. And I think that's awesome. And I appreciate that.
The last thing I'll say, so like many of us, we're doing a lot of talk around white supremacy culture. But white supremacy culture is around characteristics, and it's around the individual. Like as a site leader, I tend to look at the institutional and the structural racism that exists, because that's where things are happening. If I could change some of those, it can bypass the time it's going to take for people to reflect internally around their own individual needs, right? Because the structures and the institutions are literally doing things to people right now as we're trying to unpack our own issues as individuals.
Cliff, do you mind if I share something?
Oh no, jump on in.
Because Michael, you're doing great things. It says, I really like the strategy of using one's power to bring another person's strategy to the forefront. It is a dual in nature. It gets good It gets a good idea in front of the body and validates a person who is marginalized by the culture of the room, the organization. I don't know if you all have had the opportunity to read this book, but it's called Cast. It's another book that's floating around right now by Isabel Wilkerson. She gives this analogy, and I've been using this analogy a lot, and maybe you can use this too, when it comes to the weight that we're all feeling, whether you're white, Black, Latino, you're young, you're old, the weight that we're all feeling is it's almost as if we've inherited a home or a house, right? So she uses this analogy of her moving into a home, and it has like a leaky roof, and she has to spend, money to get it fixed, but it's not like she created the problem that caused the leaky roof. So when I think about the fabric of this country, these shores, we are inheriting a country, a house that has a bad flooring, a leaky roof, and here we are. We can't even say that our ancestors, every person who's white, every person, we can't say that there's a direct link between you and the ancestor. We don't even know that anymore. But still, here we are in this house being expected to clean it up, have the resources to straighten it on out. But then with what's happening really in the house is a lot of division about who should be able to do that. Who's the person who should do it? Your challenges are not as great as mine. It kind of feels like we enter into an oppression Olympics. Oh, well, you don't understand what I feel, but and when we get into that, we start losing the humanness, the interconnectedness as it relates to humanity. We lose that because now we're arguing about why we got this house and who got it first and who, and so you just reminded me of that when you went there. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you, Cliff, for giving me the space to give that analogy.
Oh no, always. And what it reminded me of is people, when you attack structures, I would say don't believe that it doesn't get personal, because some of those structures carry power for people. And the power is not just in, say, the racist person, but the power sometimes is in the woke folks. Attacking these structures is how I maintain power. If I don't ever get rid of the structures, though, I keep my power and I just keep attacking it and I fight it every year. And every year I fight it. If you get rid of the structure that I have to fight, then I may not feel like I have power anymore. And sometimes people that really want to get rid of structures, that want to do more than just have multicultural dinners and potlucks, and want to do more than just have the culture dance or assembly, sometimes you can be attacked because, again, you're not going after any one person. You're going after a change that makes things better and can be sustained. And so that is done through this hard work, through changing mindsets, through reinforcing what we do that gets rid of systems of oppression, and sharing with each other, because it also it gives us strength in the work that we do sometimes that we feel alone about. And so, Duran, thank you for my opportunity to.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I would like to hear from you if you have any insight. We're going to start closing up now, but for that final mark, it says, bullet rather, what virtue or value is lost when one or two identities become dominant in a society? So if you think about that image that we put up where there was like larger circles that are supposed to signify what is really being elevated in the space, right? There's the young culture. You got to be young to fit in here. You got to be older to fit in here. You got to be white. You got to be male, so on and so forth. So thinking about in our larger society, right? I feel like we're kind of living that now. We're in this pyramid structure where what's right is at the top, but there's multiplicity on the bottom. We all don't fit at the top, right? What are there ideas or are there thoughts or are there words that come to mind for you when you think about what's lost when there's one or two dominant ideologies in a society? Anybody want to share what comes up for them? Is there a virtue or a value that's lost? Gail, I see you over there thinking. Do you have any insight for us? Something that's coming up? I see you. I see a turning for you.
I was also reading what was in the chat as well, but trying to process, just like you said, the different stereotypes. And this has always been a difficult piece that I've struggled with growing up, because what I fall under in a stereotype, when it affects me, I can usually hide. I could become a chameleon in a sense. So then I avoid. And so when you were bringing up, what are these stereotypes right now in society? And I'm trying to watch that one. I'm not avoiding, not engaging, not avoiding, and putting on that chameleon. And then also not like seeing how I'm kind of negotiating based off of it, in the sense, right? Because I have a lot of the positives that, or what is considered like, oh, you have some positive things that going for you as well. I mean, so age can go either direction. And so I have age going for me. I have my skin color going for me. I have my education going for me. I have a lot of things that I fall back on. And I think I have a tendency to do that and like look at how I can bring different people along with me, but not squelch them. And so and I guess what I've been kind of pondering is a lot what Cliff had shared, when use your power, but not to open up that space, and how you open that up. Because in our organization, we spend a lot of time saying, okay, well, we want to say this, whose voice is the one that's going to get heard? And when Cliff said, no, what about instead it's saying, I heard you say blah, 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 share more. We're, so it's not staying marginalized, because all the things that are my strength have also been in a room where I got squelched. I was with our CEO, and I walked out of this meeting with a group of, with the school district leadership team. And he's like, oh my God, I could tell you're just like about ready to like lose it right now. And I said, yeah, it was, I felt like your monkey in a sense, because everything was, well, I'll just put out there, some of you might know Dr. John Eiler. I said, it was Dr. Eiler and Gail. And I said, and that's okay. But when it became that I'm the one that had said a lot of things, but then when you reiterated it, it all of a sudden became like, oh my God, this is amazing. And it was always Dr. Eiler and Gail. I said, if it was John and Gail, I'd been A-okay with it. But it was Dr. Eiler and Gail. I have my doctorate too. And so there was a lot of play there. But at the time, in the incident, and it really got us both to think about, that. So, but again, there's a lot of times, because I can be a chameleon and hide a lot of different pieces throughout my life growing up. So, yeah, so I guess those were like a lot of things that have been talked about. I think it was Molly who said, thank you for giving us the space to even get us to think, because there's a lot of things growing up. Mine is more ethnicity than skin color, but I could always hide my ethnicity. So when things were getting a little rocky, I could hide it and people wouldn't know. And so then I feel like, oh my gosh, I have this privilege, and look at these other people that it's right there. Or when I make a judgment off to somebody, then I'm like, oh my God, why did you just go there? You made a snap judgment. And even though that whole snap judgment in my mind is like less than 2 seconds where I call myself out, I get mad at myself. Why did you even go there? So it's like, so you guys brought up all that. I said way more than I was planning on saying.
It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. I think the questions that we're asking absolutely are encouraging you to think about this, but a lot of the things that may be coming up for you, you probably want to talk it out as you're thinking through it, right? No, there's richness there. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Cliff, is there anything else you want to share here before I move into the last slide of the considerations and get everyone off to their evenings?
Just a reiteration that we can use our power to always help someone else, and we're always strongest in the room when we do that. And to be purposeful in what we do, because I've learned over the last couple of weeks that we actually function in a subconscious state with what we've learned most of the time. And so we have to become people that are purposeful in our thoughts and in our actions and act consciously, and so that we can make sure we don't act on impulse that brings into those unconscious biases that we all have, and that we're working through. So thank you. And Dr. Angus, am I saying it right?
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, because that is something that I notice happens a lot. And we'll doctor the older person and male to death, and then that younger person or woman, unless they look like, they earned their doctorate, you go by first name, and it's like, why would we do that? Well, it's sometimes this unconscious bias that we have, and so we have to make sure we're purposeful in that. And so, Doc, thank you for sharing.
And that wasn't where I was going, because most people, I even forget I have a doctorate. Like I do, because I hang around with, I'm Gail, and that's fine. It was just in this public forum, and I couldn't figure out why.
No need to explain. You earned it. Thank you.
Yes. As we start moving into the close, friends, when I had the idea about the similarities and the differences, I was doing a lot of trainings, and I felt like when I would be going into like the coaching piece of it, when I would have colleagues in these spaces arguing, the point of contingency felt like people felt like they needed to make sure that the other person recognized how hard life has been for them as it relates to their intersectionality, which is real, right? So for example, if someone is sharing with me the hardships that they're feeling in whatever intersectionality, is my role to get them to convince me of that, right? Open up your scars, or do I have space and something within me to hear them and listen to them? Because we know that in reality, as long as you're alive, you're feeling something, right? And how do I use that to connect to the people who are sharing? And I want to pull on what Michael said earlier. A lot of this work, if you're asking yourself like, well, how to, a lot of this work is going to be centered in thinking about culture, the community, the school community. If you're working in education, what elements could be altered or reconsidered to create a culture of equity leadership? How do we get to a place where we are normalizing hearing each other and making opportunities to have other voices be heard? What are the protocols that are in place to ensure that other people are being heard? But a lot of time that's peeling the layer of the onion back like a lot, because you're having to get through all of this muck of supremacy, who's dominant in that space, and for how long, how many years. But a lot of that richness is in recreating a culture where voices are being heard and you're amplifying voices. So some things that I want to leave you with here: how can we use our understanding of our differences to recenter human connectedness? If you're in a space, it must be that you have something to contribute in that space, to contribute to multiplicity as being a good thing and not a deficit. And as soon as it gets to a place where that's not being had in the space anymore, that essence is lost. So that's an opportunity just to draw attention to that. If there are multiple people in a space who are supposed to be sharing an idea, but there are just 2 or 3 people speaking, well, that's the thing to troubleshoot and to point some attention to with grace. What can we do to diminish impulsive ideas, attitudes, and judgments based on differences? Friends, we recognize that if we're all feeling hurt and harmed and judgment, we got to recognize the ways that we also perpetrate that too. because we are all a part of the same house. Especially if you were born on these shores, you're always going to be working through your own unconscious bias. When that person comes into the room, scanning that person, saying, okay, well, this person's this, they're that. I have a category for them now so I can move along safely without having to hear from that person or learn from that person. So shaking that up a little bit and allowing yourself to be present and hearing, what unconscious biases or stereotypes do I have about others that creates an illusion of threat when I encounter those who are different from me? To share in a space. I'm not sure if my idea was heard. Do you mind if I share it again? Not assuming that people are not hearing you or ignoring you, but are there ways that you move more into it? Maybe there is not this dominant kind of like intersection going on. Maybe that's in our perception, and that perception is keeping us bound from doing our best work. And then finally, how can we help amplify the least dominant voices in our professional spaces? What are the tactics that you're using? Because I'm sure you're using some. And what are some other ways to amplify that? When you are speaking, maybe you want to ask in the space, is there someone else who wants to share here, just to make sure that there's opportunity and space for other voices to be heard who are usually not heard. That's all that I have here. Is there any idea or a final thought, some wisdom that you want to drop for us before we move into our final slide, which is the evaluation? Any other thing before we close? Okay. Friends, I want to thank you for your time and your space today. I love you to pieces. Let us know what we did, how we did, what can be done in these table talk spaces to amplify the space and the time being used. You can go ahead and open up your camera and enable the QR code to go in there and let us know what you need. There's also the link there. And then also there is another webinar that I'm facilitating tomorrow. That's socio-political consciousness. We're talking about shaping student self-esteem as it relates to socio-political consciousness, right? We talk about self-esteem a lot in education and the socio-emotional, socio-emotional